Show my screen now. And also thank you to Conrad and the PV Booster team for having me on today. I am always excited to talk about time of use rates and avoided cost analysis for those of you that know us, which is really what my section of the presentation is going to focus on. So I'm assuming a lot of the folks on the line already know Energy Toolbase. For those of you that don't, let me just spend 30 seconds. We are a software as a service tool, and we specialize in modeling and proposing the economics of solar and storage projects. We're very objective and third party in our approach to figuring out savings. So I kind of want to make that disclaimer right up front on this webinar. You know, we're certainly not in the business of endorsing or favoring certain vendors or technology, but rather we're taking a third party approach and being very objective and transparent on solving for both avoided cost and the financial economics of the project. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into the meat of it, which is time of use rates. So as I'm sure almost everyone on the call is already aware, there are some very significant changes happening right now in California to rate designs, and specifically to time of use rates. So this slide here is for the case study rate we're going to be looking at today, which is the SDG&E DGR rate, which is the medium large commercial post solar rate. And we're comparing the July 1, 2018 rate versus last October's rate before they implemented this pretty radical change. And really the significant thing that a lot of folks have been talking about is how the on-peak period has shifted. Oh no, it looks like my thing just crashed. Hang on with me one sec, folks. I never have technical difficulties, but it looks like my slide deck just crashed. Let me try to get that right back up. Hopefully you're still hearing me okay. I think I might be overweighting my computer with applications open today. Chat me over if you guys don't have my audio. Otherwise, I may just kind of continue on without the PowerPoint. Huh, I'm having trouble relaunching. Give me 30 seconds and hopefully I'll be right back up. Oh, bummer. Son of a gun.
Adam, go ahead, just tell them that joke you know.
Yeah, right, fill some dead space. I might just skip over the PowerPoint section for now and kind of jump right into the meat of it. Conrad, can you confirm that you still see my screen here in my browser window?
That is confirmed.
Perfect. So let's just kind of go into our visualization screen. Okay, and I've got 4 days here in the month of August, and we're going to start by looking at the old time of use rates. This again was the November of 2017, or also the grandfathered rates of today. But what I really want you to key in on is the bottom of the screen. And you can see that that on-peak window had previously been defined from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can just really visually see how the solar production curve, this happens to be a fixed tilt solar production curve, lines up pretty nicely with how that 11A to 6P window previously was defined. Okay, well, things have radically changed. And the new time of use rates that are now in effect in SDG&E territory, and I was also going to kind of mention this before I got cut there on my last slide deck, as a lot of folks are aware, are about to go into effect in both the SoCal Edison and PG&E territory, or much later in the evening. And in the SDG&E territory, you can see here it starts from 4 p.m. and extends out to 9 p.m. And right straight away, you can see how much less production is getting kind of captured under that curve. So frankly, the bottom line here is that a lot less solar production is now getting valued at that on-peak rate. And this is really the significant effect that is changing the economics of solar projects on the commercial side of the equation. So this is kind of my setup. What I'd like to do now is step into our case study where we're going to be modeling a fixed tilt roof mounted system versus a PV booster single axis tracker roof mounted system. So let me start on the fixed tilt side. And unfortunately, my computer's still bugging out a little bit, so I'm just going to assume that you guys are seeing things okay. So let's build up a fixed tilt system together. I've got a lead all configured. We're going to step right into step 4, and I'm going to add a system. I definitely want to plug, again, Evan and Helioscope. We are very close friends and allies with the Folsom Labs folks that make Helioscope. We have several hundred power users that use our 2 applications in conjunction with each other every day, building their designs and layouts and engineering in Helioscope, and then one-click importing that into Energy Toolbase to finish off with the financial analysis. For the comparison I do today, I'm going to be using the NREL engine just so we can kind of do an apples to apples comparison. So I'm going to use the PV Watts engine. And again, we're going to start with the fixed tilt. We're going to choose the recommended weather station, which again, for that same address in Vista that Evan was just looking at, is going to be the Carlsbad Palomar weather station. And I've already got my kind of pre-configured set of assumptions. We're going to do a 503 kW DC rated system, running it at a 10-degree tilt, 195 azimuth. And I've actually even got a price pre-configured. We're going to run this one initially at $2.50 a DC watt. So I'm not going to change any of the default assumptions on the PV Watt side. Let me save this. And let's just kind of do a quick interpretation of our results. We can see down here our yield on the fixed tilt system is coming in a little over 1,500 kilowatts hours by kilowatt, about 765,000 kilowatt hours of generation. If we were to really quickly look at a visualization of this fixed tilt system we just modeled, why don't I jump into a summer month and kind of maybe just scroll over about 5 or so days in the summer. And I'm just going to filter down to the, again, DGR energy costs. And there's that same effect we just saw a second ago, which is not a lot of solar is falling under that on-peak period that's now defined from 4P to 9P. You can kind of really visually see that. We've got another really cool view right here. If you were to toggle to the monthly electricity cost tab, I actually like doing this a lot, and I'll just kind of filter down to the solar generation side, right? So I'm kind of keying in on this here. And what we're doing here is we're taking that 8760 solar production profile we just generated from PV Watts, and we're overlaying it against that DGR rate schedule that features that new 4P to 9P on peak. And the part I'm really keying in on is right there. It looks like about 98,000 of our, what was it, 765,000 is in the on-peak period. I'm going to show you a summary slide in a minute, but it's about 13%. Not a lot. Not a lot is getting captured here as a result of, again, of that later on-peak window. Okay, so that's going to be our kind of our base case. Actually, there is one last thing I want to look at, and we're definitely going to unpack this in a minute, and that is the blended savings. You can look at this one of 2 ways. You can look at what sort of savings or avoided cost we achieved either in dollar per kilowatt hour terms, like we're showing here. So about 12.8 cents is the average blended value of each kilowatt hour. Or of course, you can kind of just look into dollar terms exactly how much it saved. So we'll show both of those in my summary slide in a minute. Okay, so that is the fixed tilt system. Let's step back out and now run a PV booster system, and then we'll kind of have our comparison all set up. Okay, so let's go right back into step 4. Every single other assumption of this project is identical. Really, the only things we want to change here is obviously running the single axis tracker instead of the fixed tilt. So we're going to use the same simulation engine, the NREL PV Watts V5 API, same weather station. So really the only real change I'm going to be making is over here. And per the PV Booster design guide, we're going to run this in a single axis backtracking mode. So we'll use the same system size, 503 kW DC. per the PV booster design guide, we're going to run this at a 30-degree tilt, 180 azimuth, and maybe Conrad can kind of talk on that when he comes back on in a minute. And then I did want to put in a cost value because I'm going to want to look at a comparison of the end project economics, fixed tilt versus PV booster. So I'm going to price this one at $2.85 a DC watt, which is a 35-cent premium compared to the, excuse me, compared to the fixed tilt system. And I'll, again, maybe let Conrad talk about that, or we can kind of discuss that in the Q&A. Obviously, that's a user-defined input. Okay, so let's kind of interpret our high-level results here. On the yield side, we're all the way up to almost 2,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of yield, translating to over 1 million kilowatt hours of year one kilowatt hours of solar production. And on the savings side of the equation, let's just do a really quick reference down here in the dashboard and kind of reference what the value of solar is worth. And we're coming in at about 14.5 cents, okay, per kilowatt hour compared to 12.8 cents on the fixed tilt system. So if you think about it, we really got two significant changes here. The production went up 30% in this case to 1 million kilowatt hours compared to 760,000 on the fixed tilt system. Additionally, the value, the average blended value of each kilowatt hour also went up. So it's like we're producing more and all of those kilowatt hours on average are worth more. So let's kind of unpack what happened there behind the scenes. I'm going to step into a visualization mode. And let's kind of go to those, maybe about those same 5 or 6 days in the month of July that we were just looking at. And right straight away, you can kind of see the change in shape from the single axis backtracker system. I kind of like referring to this, it just has a wider shoulder, right? This is certainly kind of starts earlier and ends later compared to that fixed tilt system. And you can see as I'm hovering my mouse right here, kind of in the 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock hour, we're capturing more production in the on-peak window. So if I was to kind of look at the annualized result of this, we'll do the same thing we just did a second ago, and just look at all of those kilowatt hours of solar production distributed into the time window table. You can see now we're all the way up to about 150,000 kilowatt hours in that on-peak window, compared to under 100,000 on the fixed tilt. So not only are we producing more, we're producing quite a bit more into that on-peak window as a result of those wider shoulders. Slides, on the left, you can clearly see the fixed tilt versus the PV booster model we just ran. Again, both using the PV watts engine. On the yield, let's start there. Okay, so again, just in percentage terms, we achieved 31% more production on an annual basis, PV booster one-axis tracking versus the fixed tilt system. The kind of big number, and I think you probably already mentioned this when I dropped, Conrad, is the increased savings. So this is really where you're getting that double effect. Not only do we have 31% more kilowatt hours, those kilowatt hours are worth more on average. That's that 14.5 cents compared to the 12.8 cents for this particular run. So that's a really kind of significant double boost on this particular project. And let me actually just unpack that a little bit more. So why that happens is, again, because of that later 4P to 9P on peak period. So as you can see here, the on-peak kilowatt hours, on-peak PV kilowatt hours on the PV booster, about 153,000 compared to 98,000. So that translates to a 56% increase in on-peak production. Again, 31% increase in total PV production, but so much more is happening in that on-peak window, which is really driving that math. There's one last thing I want to kind of throw in here. Hopefully this screen displays. You guys seen my visualization screen, I attempted to kind of just overlay the two on top of each other here. So this again is like the fixed tilt system, the normal bell curve we're used to looking at, and I'm going to now overlay the PV booster profile on top. Now this is a little bit different because here I am in a winter month. Okay, so this is January 10 through January 13. And I think the takeaway here is not only are the shoulders wider, right, and we're capturing more in the on-peak period, but the highs are higher. And this is a result of the fact that we modeled the fixed tilt system at a 10 tilt 195 azimuth versus a 30 tilt on the tracker system. So that's also kind of driving this effect if you were to expand that out wider or kind of toggle over to a summer month. Again, basically, we're producing more at the right time, and that's really driving that effect. A lot of folks want to ultimately bake down their analysis to financial metrics, right? So everything we're looking at right now is just pretty much avoided cost. A lot of times you'll want to say, okay, well, what did that do to a payback period? Or maybe an internal rate of return on a comparison basis. So we used all the same assumptions across the steps 1 through 3, and just running this into a simple cash purchase. And I think on the incentive side, just so I have a kind of disclaimer on what I modeled with, pretty standard stuff. We're taking the federal tax credit, we're taking federal bonus depreciation, and we're going to also claim a state maker's depreciation in both examples. And let's just really quickly, lastly, look at that slide. So again, the total install cost, I'll leave that to Conrad and the Rusty Woods of the world who really understand project pricing and installed pricing. I'm just using 35 cents in this particular example. And you can see down on the bottom of the screen what that translates to in a comparison of both payback and IRR. It obviously really juices the savings of the project. Those increased, the 48% in avoided cost increased savings is certainly more than making up for the 35 cent per DC watt increase in total installed cost. So just to kind of wrap my section up, this is obviously one case study that we just looked at. I'm always cautious to say, drawing too general of conclusions off of one case study project. I will say that I did not really cherry pick this deal, right? If I was to run maybe 10 other load profiles with this exact same comparison analysis, I'm sure we would see some projects that get weaker results. That, again, the key number there was that 48% number, right? And there's some that would even be stronger. So this is just one project. I will say that the SDG&E DGR rate really does exacerbate and kind of, because the price signal is so sharp, right? The on peak, we could just really quickly peek at that maybe as a last order of business. In the summer, that DGR on peak to off peak energy rate is really, really sharp, right? 57 cent on peak, 23 cent mid peak. So that's really what's driving this 48% increase. And again, I think a big takeaway for other folks in other territories like SoCal Edison and PG&E, where similar changes are about to go into effect, you're going to need to run this analysis on that specific rate with that specific load profile, and that's really what, as you hopefully know, what Energy Toolbase specializes in.